Hello, my name is Fred Bear. I'm the old codger. Fred is my given name and Bear is my nickname. I was born in 1941, which makes me 84 years old at the time of making this film in 2025. The origins of the word codger are a bit obscure, but there's one belief it means an old man dodging the coffin. I'm attempting to dodge the coffin by eating right, keeping an active mind and getting plenty of physical exercise. And why am I standing by this old dunny? It's because in the past I was known as a privyologist. That's someone who takes a deep interest in the finer workings of the loo. I'm also known as a dunny confessor. A dunny confessor takes confessions from older people about the misdemeanours they carried out around the loo when they were children. One confession I took was from an old man who, when a child, played a joke on his sister. He opened the little door at the back of the loo. The little door was where the sano man, or the sanitary man, collector of night soil, removed the full can from. The joke revolved around the old gentleman giving his sister a jab in the bottom with a broom handle which had two nails sticking out of it, snake fang width apart. His sister ran out of the loo screaming, "I've been bitten by a snake." Her mother took her to hospital where the doctors treated her for snake bite. The old gentleman never told anyone until he told me. Before going on, I should explain how I acquired the nickname of Fred Bear. My wife Bev and I have been called Mr. and Mrs. Bear since 1972, when we were on what we called our grand tour of Europe and the Middle East in a VW Beetle. We were staying with friends in Cordoba, Spain, and they had a young daughter who approached her father with a book entitled Fred Bear. She asked her father to read it to her. His reply was, "There's Fred Bear over there," indicating in my direction. "Have a real Fred Bear read it to you." I read the book and she continued calling me Fred Bear for all the time we were in Cordoba. The name has stuck ever since. A year later, when we lived on a large estate in England, the owner introduced us to his friends as Mr. and Mrs. Bear, rather than by our single names. In later years we set up a ceramics business and we called it Bear Creations. During our travels over the years we have had a number of toy bear mascots, but unfortunately we have lost some of them. Our first bear was T-Bear. He jumped off the handlebars of my bike in Dresden in 2014. The replacement bear, B-Bear, was lost on a plane flight to Zurich in 2019, and our most recent bear, A-Bear, who is still with us, I bought in Austria also in 2019. And now to my longevity theories. Eating right, keeping an active mind and getting plenty of physical exercise. Fortunately, eating right comes naturally to me as I enjoy cooking, and therefore over the years I have developed a style of cooking that suits me. I lean towards both Asian and Mediterranean style foods, with one exception, and that's a bowl of oats in the morning. Eating along Asian lines might have something to do with my Chinese ancestors. I'm not a vegetarian, but prefer to eat white meat such as chicken or fish whenever possible. My way of keeping my mind active is to get involved in the digital world. The making and editing of these films, for instance, has taken me there. Also, I enjoy drawing, map making and writing, and I'm sure those activities keep my mind active as well. Back in the 1950s, when I was at school, I spent many hours drawing maps of the world on the blackboard for the teacher. So drawing and making maps has been with me for a long time. I left school at 15. I didn't even get the intermediate certificate, as I was hopeless at maths and English. I did, however, top my year in woodwork, metalwork, tech drawing and social studies. My interest in social studies, which is history and geography, turned me into a traveller, and as well I collected stamps, and I remember thinking to myself when I mucked about with my collection, saying, I'm going there one day. When it comes to keeping physically active, maintaining our small property and doing general maintenance keeps me fit. Add this to going bike riding and bike packing, keeps me fit as well. Another factor to add to my longevity theories is to have a good companion at my side. My good companion has been my wife Bev. She has been at my side for 53 years. It is said, where you see Fred you see Bev, and where you see Bev you see Fred. Bev and I met on the squash courts in 1971 in Tamworth, New South Wales. Just after we met, she told me she had booked a passage on a Greek ship to Europe from where she intended to go to England and work. Soon after she left, I realised I'd been bitten by the love bug. The only cure for my affliction was to be with her. After a couple of phone calls, we agreed I should fly to Munich in Germany, where she was staying with her brother, and decide if we had a future together. The main thing that bound us together was the desire to travel and to see the world, and I considered myself qualified to show her the world, as the year before we met I had driven overland from Sydney to London in a Land Rover. It didn't take us long to work out a travel plan. We decided to buy a car, which happened to be a VW Beetle, and go on a camping trip to the Middle East. We were unsure where we would end up. All we knew was we would head east and visit as many countries as possible along the way. I had hopes of getting to Baghdad in Iraq, as when a child I read Chums magazines, and in them were stories about Baghdad. In later years I read Agatha Christie's novel They Came to Baghdad, and that inspired me to want to go there as well. Unfortunately, we never made it to Baghdad. We only got as far east as Damascus in Syria. We never got into Iraq, as there was a border dispute and the border was closed to the likes of us. Because we couldn't get into Iraq, we decided, when in Lebanon, to ship our Beetle to Egypt and drive along the North African coast to Morocco, about 4,000 kilometres west of Cairo. But because we had to go via Cyprus, it simply became too difficult, and in addition, Gaddafi, the ruler of Libya at the time, closed the border between Egypt and Libya, which meant no go for foreigners. We did, however, go to Morocco in later years, and we found it a magical place. Morocco is one of those countries we would go back to, as in our minds it's a little rough on the corners, and it's rough on the corner countries we like. Up until 1972, Bev had never slept in a tent or sleeping bag, let alone stealth camp, so I had to introduce her to my way of travelling and camping gently. I've often been asked, especially now we're bikepacking, how come your wife will go with you on your adventures? My reply is, make sure they never have a bad night. Bev to this day admits she has never had an uncomfortable night. Most of our 1972-73 trip was in the middle of winter. We experienced all the problems associated with the freezing conditions, but we were young, resilient, and we took pride in our survival. The Beetle was a perfect car for cold conditions, as it had an air-cooled motor and therefore not prone to freezing. On occasions the Beetle locks and windscreen wipers froze, but it was a simple matter of pouring boiling water over them to thaw them out. In 2017 we came across an identical Beetle in Italy to the one we undertook our grand tour with, and we looked at it with envy. Not being able to drive across North Africa, we decided to have a complete change and go to the Scandinavian countries in the far north of Europe. This meant a major drive back through the east through Syria, Turkey, Greece, Italy, France and Spain. We took a long way round, back into France then into Belgium and Holland to Bremerhaven in northern Germany, where we intended to take a ferry to Norway. But unfortunately there was no ferry going for 4 days, and we didn't want to wait that long. So we took a ferry to Harwich in England. It was a spur-of-the-moment decision. Going to England wasn't such a bad idea, as we were running a little short on funds and we needed to get work, and it was easier to get work in an English-speaking country. Once in England, Bev suggested we approach the owner of an estate where she worked as a companion to the owner's mother before I arrived in Munich months before. We met with the owner, and once I told him I was a trained toolmaker, he immediately offered me a job in his small engineering works nearby. The next step was to get Bev a job, and because there was a vacancy in the inspection department of his works, I taught her how to read a micrometer, and she was employed in the same company as well. John, the owner of the estate, offered us free accommodation, provided I work on the estate on weekends as a jobbing gardener. A jobbing gardener is one who does the heavy work around the garden. Our host was a highly decorated RAF pilot. He flew around 80 bombing missions over war-torn Europe during World War II and survived, which was pretty unusual, as the fatality rates for bomber crews during World War II was appalling. In the latter part of his wartime career, he flew what was considered the most formidable aircraft in the air at the time, the fighter light bomber, the Mosquito. Eventually it came time to leave, and we toured around the UK and finally returned to Australia via Mexico and Fiji. In Mexico, Bev bought her wedding dress, and in Fiji we bought a wedding ring. Then after we arrived back in Australia, we got married and started planning our life together. I proposed to Bev in a small town called Perast in the Bay of Kotor in Montenegro about a year before. In 2012 we returned to Perast and reenacted my proposal. 3 years after we were married, we bought land and started to build a house. Our house is far from conventional, as it is made from mud bricks and recycled timbers. Bev and I, with the help of friends, made around 40,000 bricks. I now look on the house as a piece of craft work. It has many creative features, including stained glass windows. It's the biggest piece of craft work I've ever done. We built our house without borrowing money, as we thought that borrowing money took away our freedom to travel. Owing money meant getting a regular paying job to cover the debt. We wanted to have our cake and eat it too, you could say. The building of the house will be subject of a film I intend making in the future. During the 1980s, Bev and I not only built a house, but we set up a ceramics business with the help of a friend, Ian. Ian and I knew each other years before I met Bev. Ian and I drove overland from Sydney to London in a Land Rover in 1970. At the end of the overland journey, we hitchhiked around the UK and returned to Australia via Kenya, where we bought a 250cc BSA motorbike and went looking for gorillas. There are many tales to tell about the overland drive and our experiences in Africa. In the future, I will also make a film about the overland drive and our travels in Africa on a motorbike. The 1980s and 90s were the halcyon days for us. Our ceramics business was booming, and having Ian on hand to look after the business aspect of things meant we were able to continue travelling at will. Our ceramic business is still, in 2025, producing works of art to a limited degree. It could be said we've played our cards right. In 1989 we added an unusual creation to our range of ceramics. Working in our pottery shed at the time was a lass whose uncle had recently died, and she was wondering what she would do with his ashes. I said, "I'll make you an urn." The urn turned out to have a very Australian flavour, as it had gum nuts and gum leaves on it as a decoration. This old codger's not interested in getting into one just yet. I'm going to make a film about our ceramics business, and I guarantee it'll be entertaining because I perfected the art of making the miniature Australian dunny. I've written 2 books about the good old Australian icon. The first one even had a string which you could hang in the loo. Ours a top class reading if you like that sort of thing. And the second one, a bit more upmarket, further down the back. It details the history of the Australian dunny in detail.
The outhouse is deserted, we don't go there anymore. So we sat running round it, there's no hinges on his door. No more we'll make our journey down that old familiar track. Oh, how we mourn the passing of the outhouse down the back. 'Cause now we've got a new room for the outhouse, it's the...
As I said, we continued to travel in the 80s and 90s, but no longer was it just Bev and myself. We travelled with our 2 boys, Tim and Toby. We went to Asia, Canada, Europe, the UK and Ireland. On one trip we took our boys to stay for an extended period at the estate where Bev and I worked in the 1970s. We put the boys into school and Bev and I went exploring the English countryside, at least during school hours. John and Elizabeth had not had young children to stay for years. It was a fresh experience for them. John enjoyed reading them Edwardian ghost stories and teaching them how to play croquet. I'm looking forward to making a film about John's life, as I have access to his wartime diaries and photographs. In 2012, Bev and I decided to return to Europe and retrace our steps of the 70s and 80s. We started in the magic city of Istanbul and travelled northwest to Zurich by public transport. We found travelling by public transport an adventure in itself, but after hiring a car in Switzerland and battling traffic in France, we decided never to hire a car again in Europe, but go bikepacking and travel at snail's pace. Bev and I had been bikepacking for years, but we got serious in 2014 when we bought 2 fold-up bikes in Zurich, Switzerland, and headed off along the extensive bike paths there. Bike paths in Europe are known as Eurovelos. There is 90,000 kilometres of bike paths and greenways in Europe along which you can ride. Between 2014 and 2019 we travelled at a snail's pace with our fold-up bikes. We caught the odd train if the weather was bad. We travelled to Sweden, to Tarifa in southern Spain, where we left our bikes and took a ferry to Morocco for a short time, to the Balkan states in the east, to Wales in the UK. It could be said we've seen a lot of Europe at snail's pace. Travelling at snail's pace means you come to understand the culture of the country you are travelling through to a greater degree. You come in contact with the locals who sometimes buy you a coffee or a meal, and you simply slow down, which brings you in contact with nature. It's been said to me that there is very little nature in Europe. This is not the case, as there are some magnificent forests and rivers to explore. Bev and I have ridden parts of the Rhine, Danube, Oder, Elbe and Loire rivers. The Loire River is in France, and much to the satisfaction of cyclists there is a bike path running along most of it, which is part of the Eurovelo 6 bike path. The Eurovelo 6 runs from France to the Black Sea in Romania. It's around 3,700 kilometres long. In 2019, Bev and I did a mammoth bike trip in Europe. We rode 4,000 kilometres in 5 months. The ride took us through 8 countries. I'll make a film about that adventure in the coming months too. During the 2019 bike packing journey, we rode part of the Iron Curtain cycleway. The Iron Curtain went from Barents Strait at the Finnish-Russian border to the Black Sea in Bulgaria. Along the Iron Curtain there was an access road, and part of this road was converted to a cycleway. The cycleway is 10,550 kilometres long. We have it on our bucket list for the future. That's if we are blessed with long years. Bikepacking, for those of you who don't understand the term, is touring with a bicycle and carrying a minimum amount of gear. Bikepackers carry a small tent into which they can just fit. Bev and I sleep very close in our tent, which is an advantage when it's cold. They carry a sleeping bag, a lightweight sleeping mattress and a stove on which to cook. Bikepackers try to free camp wherever possible. If you decide to take up bikepacking, be warned, it's addictive. For all of our bikepacking activities in Europe we use Zurich as a base, and the reason is around 35 years ago we met in a park near where we live 2 Swiss bikepackers. They were riding around the world. We have remained in contact with them ever since. Rolf returned to Australia recently. He was retracing his steps too. He left our home in New South Wales and rode across the infamous Nullarbor to Perth. It took him 40 days to ride the 3,300 kilometres. During the 40 days he had 4 rest days. Bev and I are not into riding the Nullarbor. It's a bit too arduous for us. We do, however, do shorter trips, and one ride we did not so long ago was to ride the Brisbane Valley Rail Trail. It's about 160 kilometres long and runs from Yarraman to near Ipswich, which is just west of Brisbane. Bev and I rode the BVRT, as it's known, in 6 days, and we found it exciting. What made it exciting was the rough patches along the way. Some might say, how come this old codger can remember the details relating to what he's built, made and where he's travelled over the years? Easy, I've kept diaries. I have 80 of them in which I have recorded my daily doings for the past 55 years. The diaries contain details relating to a trip Bev and I did to the centre of the earth in West China, which included visiting the Mountains of the Moon and the barren desert areas near the Turfan Depression. A sea kayaking expedition to the Southern Ocean in the remote wilderness area of southwest Tasmania. My time as a freelance reporter for the ABC radio, and the making of 2 3-wheel recumbent bikes during the COVID lockdown, and many other events I've not mentioned in this film. And finally, on the subject of diaries, of late I've been making and recording our travels in a concertina diary. A concertina diary is really a folding book. I have 6 of them. They are fun to make, and even more fun to have people you meet when travelling make a comment in them. They are also great conversation pieces. When someone asks you, as they say in India, you are coming from and you are going to, all you have to do is show them your folding diary. There is no need for long explanations. My 2019 diary is 8 metres long. The making of folding diaries takes a bit of know-how. I already have most of the video footage complete showing how to make them. In the 1930s, a little before my time, when the end came, they used to say, "That's it, folks."